President Trump declined to express confidence Monday in Rep. Tom Marino RPA, his drugs czar nominee, in the wake of the Washington Post 60 Minutes investigation that found the lawmaker helped steer legislation that made it harder for the government to take some enforcement actions against giant drug companies. Trump said, "We're going to be looking into the report that Marino helped guide the legislation that sailed through Congress last year with virtually no opposition." The president's comments came as some Democrats called for Trump to drop Marino as his pick to lead the Office of National Drug Control Policy, while others unveiled legislation to undo the law Marino backed. Speaking in the White House Rose Garden, Trump defended Marino as a very early supporter of mine and a great guy. He said that he had seen the reporting in question and that the White House would be reviewing the information. Trump also said that he will have a major announcement, probably next week, about how his administration plans to tackle opioid addiction in the United States, a massive problem that he wants to get absolutely right. "This country and, frankly, the world has a drug problem," he said. "We're going to do something about it." Asked by a reporter whether he would be declaring the epidemic a national emergency, Trump said, "We're going to be doing that next week." But Trump first said he was going to declare a national opioid emergency in August and has not yet done so. Trump said he had not yet spoken with Marino about the Post 60 Minutes report, but said that if he determines that Marino's work was detrimental to the administration's goal of combating opioid addiction, "I will make a change." On Monday, Democrats called on Trump to quickly discard Marino in the wake of an investigation by the Washington Post and 60 Minutes that detailed how a targeted lobbying effort helped weaken the Drug Enforcement Administration's ability to go after drug distributors, even as opioid-related deaths continue to rise. Senate Minority Leader Charles E. Schumer DNY said nominating the Pennsylvania lawmaker for drug czar is like putting the wolf in charge of the hen's house. "The American people deserve someone totally committed to fighting the opioid crisis, not someone who's labored on behalf of the drug industry." Sen. Joe Manchin 3DW, also said he was horrified to read details of the investigation and called for Trump to drop Marino because there's no way that in having the title of the drug czar that you'll be taken seriously or effectively by anyone in West Virginia and the communities that have been affected by this, knowing that you were involved in something that had this type of effect. Marino was first floated as a potential drug czar last spring, but withdrew from consideration, citing a family illness. But the White House formally nominated him for the post in September. The Senate Judiciary Committee has yet to set a date for his confirmation hearing because Marino has not sent back answers to a written questionnaire that all nominees must complete before a hearing, a spokesman said. Members of the committee also didn't immediately return requests for comment on the nomination or declined to comment. Ultimately, Marino could be confirmed by the Senate with a simple majority vote. Across Capitol Hill, congressional Democrats announced plans to address the investigation's findings, but as of Monday afternoon, no Republican lawmaker had announced their opposition to Marino's legislation or plans to introduce legislation in response. Sen. Claire McCaskill DMO said Monday that she would introduce legislation that would repeal the Ensuring Patient Access and Effective Drug Enforcement Act of 2016. The law, she said, has significantly affected the government's ability to crack down on opioid distributors that are failing to meet their obligations and endangering our communities. McCaskill, as the top Democrat on the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, has used her perch to probe opioid manufacturers, and is pushing them for sales and marketing materials, studies of potential addictions and whether the firms are donating to third-party advocacy groups that champion their work. It was unclear Monday afternoon how much support McCaskill's bill would receive and whether it would ever be taken up for a vote in the GOP-controlled House and Senate. Sen. Richard J. Blumenthal D-Con also called for Trump to withdraw Marino's nomination, saying in an interview that the head of that office is supposed to be a watchdog, not a lapdog. He obviously is much more an industry representative than he is a whistleblower or watchdog. It will be ugly if Trump continues with the nomination, Blumenthal said. In the House, at least 3 Democrats, Reps. Gerald E. Connolly VA, Brian Fitzpatrick Paugh, and Kirsten Sinema Rees were working on bills that would rescind the thresholds put in place by Marino's bill and give the DA more authority to suspend a distributor's license. Rep. Peter Welch DVT, an original co-sponsor of Marino's legislation, said that he supported the bill on behalf of a small drug distributor in Burlington, Vermont that had concerns about how the DA worked with drug companies. He called on the Oversight and Energy and Commerce Committees to hold hearings on the legislation that would include testimony from current and former DEA officials. One of Marino's home state senators, Sen. Robert P. Casey DPA, is withholding judgment on Marino's nomination, but a spokesman for the senator said that he believes the congressman should be asked to address this matter. Casey also believes that the legislation Marino backed should be repealed immediately and D's authority to hold drug distributors to tough standards should be restored, said spokesman John Rizzo. Mention: McCaskill and Casey face re-election next year in rural states that Trump won last year. Despite their concerns, they did not oppose the legislation when it passed in the Senate last year by unanimous consent. McCaskill was away from Congress for 3 months last year being treated for breast cancer when the bill was approved. Manchin said in the interview that his aides responsible for tracking drug policy had raised concerns about Marino's legislation as it worked its way through Congress last year. They had questions and they had concerns from the beginning, but they were laid to rest by the DIA. We're going to find out how that could happen and why, Manchin said. As an alternative to Marino, Manchin suggested that Trump consider nominating Joseph T. Ranazzisi to serve as drug czar. Ranazzisi ran the D's division responsible for regulating the drug industry and led a decade-long campaign of aggressive enforcement until he was forced out of the agency in 2015. If Trump prefers to nominate a partisan figure, we can find a Republican who has a passion because of the devastation to their own family. That won't be hard to find in America, I can assure you that, Manchin said. Fallout from the investigation also has spread to electoral politics. Rep. Marsha Blackburn R10, who is running for Senate in a state that has been hit hard by the opioid crisis, is also fielding attacks for being a lead sponsor of Marino's bill. James Mackler, the Senate race's Democratic frontrunner, criticized Blackburn over her involvement, saying in a statement late Sunday, "I'm running for U.S. Senate because Tennesseans need a senator that will stand up for them rather than catering to special interests and corporate lobbyists." That Congresswoman Blackburn would champion legislation like this while Tennesseans face an opioid epidemic is all one needs to know about her priorities, he said. In April 2016, a handful of members of Congress, allied with the nation's major drug distributors, prevailed upon the DIA and the Justice Department to agree to the more industry-friendly legislation, undermining efforts to staunch the flow of pain pills, according to the Post 60 Minutes investigation. The DIA had opposed the effort for years. The law was the crowning achievement of a multifaceted campaign by the drug industry to weaken aggressive DIA enforcement efforts against drug distribution companies that were supplying corrupt doctors and pharmacists who peddled narcotics to the black market. The industry worked behind the scenes with lobbyists and key members of Congress, pouring more than $1 million into their election campaigns. The chief advocate of the law that hobbled the DIA was Marino, who spent years trying to move it through Congress. It passed after Sen. Orrin G. Hatch negotiated a final version with the DIA. Hatch defended his support for the legislation and Marino on Monday, saying in a statement that he does not believe one flawed report should derail a nominee who has a long history of fighting illegal drug use and of helping individuals with chronic conditions obtain treatment. Let's not ignore the full story here in the rush toward easy politics, Hatch added. Besides the sponsors and co-sponsors of the bill, few lawmakers knew the true impact the law would have. The White House was equally unaware of the bill's import when President Barack Obama signed it into law, according to interviews with former senior administration officials. The DIA and the Justice Department have denied or delayed more than a dozen requests filed by the Post and 60 Minutes under the Freedom of Information Act for public records that might shed additional light on the matter. Some of those requests have been pending for nearly 18 months. The Post is now suing the Justice Department in federal court for some of those records. Read more: the full investigation into the drug industry's triumph over the DIA analysis. This shows everything people hate about Washington. Joe Ranazzisi, the DIA official who fought the drug companies and lost.